Okay, we're going to do the Mitzvah Shem today, Halacha Beis. The Halacha says, Makom Sheisol Noigim Kula B'Yayin Shal Kechavim. If you're in a place where the Yidden are Meko and they eat Stam Yayin, Af HaSheich Arshe. What? No, the Shulchan wasn't talking about that. So the thing is, you can't drink the Sheich either. Okay, where does this thing come from? It comes from a Gemara. Okay, the Gemara that this comes on is right after the Gemara from Halacha Aleph, which was the Gemara of Halacha Aleph said that you're now to drink Sheicher from a guy in all kinds of situations. We talked about that. And then the Gemara says, a story of Shmuel Bar Bisna, okay, that he came to a place called Mergaon. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And those people in Mergaon were people who were not makbid about avoiding Stam Yain. So they said to him, would you like to drink some? They offered him some wine, so he wouldn't drink it, because they weren't makbid on Stam Yain. So they offered him some Sheicher. So he said he wouldn't drink that either. So he says, I understand why you don't drink the wine, but why wouldn't you drink the Sheicher? So the Gemara says, the wine is also Mishum Shimtza, which is, it's a possibility that it's Yain Nesach, and the Sheicher is also Mishum Shimtza the Shimtza. Maybe if I'll drink the Sheicher, I'm in the drinking the wine, and if I drink the wine, I might be drinking Yain Nesach.
What's the word Shimtza mean?
It means like a, I don't know what it means. It means like a concern. That's what I get. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the word means. Okay, so that's the Gemara comes from. And that is to say he wasn't at all concerned that there was something trace about the Sheicher. There's nothing at all, he had no shilos about the kashrus of the ingredients of it. And had it belonged to a guy, he'd be allowed to drink it according to the rules we had beforehand. He'd have to drink it out of the house, and all those kind of rules of what he would have to do. But other than that, it was perfectly fine to have it, except that in this case, because these people in Mergaon were people who were not makbid on these Isurim, so he didn't drink the Sheicher because he might drink the wine, and he wouldn't drink the wine because maybe it would be stam. Okay? They were Jewish. It's particular because they were Jewish. Had they been Goyim, it would have been usher. It would have been to follow the rules we had before. They are worse than the Goyim. Their word has a worse thing. Okay. He knew that it was kosher. There's nothing wrong to be worried about. There's nothing to be worried about. Okay, now, so that means if we take this at face value, that means that we know, and we talked about it recently, that the shilos of Maharshal of Pesach, we think about if a Yid owns a company, we have Sazerac is a manufacturer, and we have the Manhattan distributors who distribute beer, and we have Binny's who's a retailer, all of it owned by Yid, and we think about Maharshal of Pesach for all these kind of people. But it would mean this: forget about Maharshal of Pesach, you wouldn't be able to eat this up anytime. You can't drink your Sheicher, and remember we talk about that. Whiskey is essentially concentrated Sheicher, so you wouldn't be allowed to drink your Sheicher because it's owned by a Yid who's not careful about mitzvahs. So we would say if this person who drinks Stam Yain, you shouldn't be able to drink your Sheicher. Okay.
The Gemara, it's a Makom Sheisrael.
A city. Makom is a city, right?
I'm Makmed.
No. So the Gemara talked about he was at a person, he was at a place.
So in that community, they weren't Makmed.
Okay, and therefore?
So here the community is Makmed.
No, the point is not the community. The point is if I drink from you, and you're a person who's not Makmed, if I drink your Sheicher, I might drink your wine also.
In the community, they're not Makmed, so therefore he made a Gzeira, and he said, I'm not drinking your beer too. But it has to do with the community. The community is Makmed.
What does that do with the community? It has to do with the person.
That's what Gzeira was.
What is that? It's not. Okay. So the truth is, the Bach says like you say, but nobody else agrees like that. No, the Bach.
Is that you said in the community, then just follow the community.
Right.
The individual.
It's a Makom. That's what they're
What is the Maharshal?
What did you say?
Yeah, I missed the connection there also. Yeah.
I said, we think about these companies Le'inyan Maharshal of Pesach. But otherwise, we can happily drink it. If it's Sukkot time, we want to drink their stuff, it's no problem. We don't think about this. The din is saying here, okay, the way I do it, I think everybody agrees.
This guy's just a businessman over here.
Okay. Bob arguing with the Bach? Shulchan says Makom.
Okay. I'll get to someone who I'm going to talk to you about it. Why you never heard of this din? But the simple reasoning, according to me, the way I see it is that you would think that it'll be usher. Now, the first hint that there's something wrong with what I'm telling you. Okay, the first hint that I'm telling you, besides to keep us jumping on me, the first hint that there's something wrong with what I'm saying to you is the following. This is what the Torah says. Okay, this is what the Torah says. Kashrus Rashba, Makam Sheisol Noigim Sham Kul B'Yayin Shel Goyim Afil HaSheich Arshe. Okay, isn't that you find that funny? I find that funny. Why do you say Kashrus Rashba? That's what the Gemara says. It's not the Rashba didn't say that. I mean, the Rashba says it, but
No and cooler. Is it they're over this or no?
Noigim Kula means that they're sort of not so careful. Okay, they're not so strong about taking care of the issue. So,
no, but they hold they're doing the right thing. They're not. Disregarding this, they have a cool shot to touch on this.
So we're coming to that. Well, I'm going to explain to you what that means in a second. I'll explain to you what that means in a second. But isn't it odd to you that it says? Isn't it odd to you that it says Kashrus for Rasha? Okay, to me that was odd. And in fact, no, the answer.
Why is it odd? He's saying the Rosh is passing it like that.
It's a Gemara. The Gemara just said it. So why do they put it?
It's a story in the Gemara.
Okay, so the answer is it's a good question. And in fact, the Rashba himself says it. The Rashba himself says it. The Rashba, this quote that you're seeing is from Teres Abayis HaKotzer. Okay, in Teres Abayis Aruch, he says, the Gemara says this story. He says, but I'm not really sure, he says, that this story is really usher. I'm not sure that's like this story. He says it's because, seemingly, the Gemara is even being maramis that it's Xera. He said, don't drink the shecher, because you might drink the yain. If you drink the yain, you might end up drinking stam yain. He says, I'm not convinced. He says, maybe it's just a chumrah that he did for himself, that he was more business, didn't want to drink from this stuff. He says, it doesn't mean that it's really an isser. He says, well, Kenzain it is. Maybe it's like, well, say it's Chavik Xera, maybe it is including the Xera. So in Teres Abayis Aruch, he's not convinced that it's really usher. I think he ends off, I don't remember how the Bayis Aruch ends up, but he's not convinced at all. But in the Bayis HaKotzer, he says that it's usher. So the Torah is bringing it from there. And in fact, if we look, this is how the Rif brings down the Gemara. Okay, and this is how the Rambam brings down the Gemara, and this is how the Rosh brings down the Gemara. Okay. They all don't quote it. Okay, they all say nothing. Okay, you don't think I have fun making my slides also? So this is how they all quote the Gemara. Okay, which is to say is they don't think the Gemara is halacha l'maisa. Okay, so if the Torah wants to say the thing, he's not going to be from the Gemara because nobody else thinks that it's halacha l'maisa. Even the Rashba himself wasn't convinced that it was halacha l'maisa. So he brings the Kashrus of Rashba because in Teres Abayis HaKotzer he says that in fact that you should do, but by no means is it convincing that that's really the thing. Okay, now to us it's actually a little odd, okay? just for the technicalities of it, which is everybody knows that the Beverages said that he's going to follow the majority of the Rif, the Rambam, and the Rosh. Okay, so over here it's not a majority. Here, all three of them said that halacha l'maisa. So the funny thing that he would paskin like that. I mean, he the Torah himself paskin not like his father the Rosh. You know, it is a little odd. To me, it's odd. But anyhow, so the first thing is. According to many Rishonim, okay, even the Rashba himself is not convinced. According to many Rishonim, that whole Gemara is not halacha l'maisa. Okay, so the first, because of course the Mechaber brought it, and everyone on the page seems to go along with it. Everybody seems to be happy with this thing. But by the first thing that we have to say is that it's not at all clear that that's really the thing like this thing. Okay. Second point, we saw in Halacha Aleph. When the Gemara talked about shecher, the acknowledging shecher from a guy under all kinds of conditions, we saw that there was a machlokes. The Mechaber says it applies to all shecher, and the Ramah says it only applies to shecher tomorrow. Okay, most Rishonim say like the Mechaber that it applies to all kinds of shecher, any kind of alcoholic beverage, and maybe even some non-ones. We talked about it, but the Ramah says it only applies to shecher tomorrow. Now. The Gemara, this Gemara from Bar Bisna is the next line in the Gemara. It's right after that story. After the Gemara goes through all the shak of Tari about that, comes from Bar Bisna who did something else with Shecher. So if you think like the Ramah that it's only by Shecher tomorrow, Shulchan, he says, it's the next piece of Gemara. It's the same rules of Shecher. Whatever Shecher meant in the first line of the Gemara, that's what it means in the next line of the Gemara also. Which is to say is that according to the Ramah, seemingly, it only applies to Shecher tomorrow, which means for us nothing. Whoever drinks Shecher tomorrow, that's not a very common thing that we're going to have. So it would mean that the whole thing would be also, just like Halacha Aleph, we don't care so much about it. It's not so Halacha L'maisa for us. Halacha Beis would be also. Okay? Now, nobody else says it. I mean, I see the Aruch Shulchan says it. I don't see other people saying that the Ramah from there applies to here also. Which makes us think that maybe it's not true. The Ramah himself didn't say it's only by Shecher tomorrow. They said on Halacha, maybe that's what, it's understood like that. Not clear to me. There's a reason to be momekel over here. I just told you, most Rishonim don't hold that this thing is even usher in the first place. Okay, but it's not so clear. Because you could understand, Shmuel Bar Bisna, when he was saying, I don't want to drink Shecher, It wasn't a takana sheikh. He said, I don't want to drink anything from these people because I may end up with wine. It wasn't so clear. Okay. Lastly, we're going to be real short today. Lastly, it seems that the Maharshal wrote a Pirush on the Torah, okay, which I tried to find it, and the best I could find was that we don't have a print of his Pirush on the Torah. But the Taz brings it, and the Priester brings it, brings that the Maharshal said the following thing. He says that when the Gemara says that the story happened in this place called Mergaon, he says it wasn't just a story. The reason why the Gemara is saying that is because the people in Mergaon were at a very specific level of observance. Okay? Those were people that were overall makbid on eating things that were kosher, or doing the right thing that they were supposed to do. In this thing, they were noig and kula. They were a little lax in the way they did this mitzvah. Maybe they were lax in other mitzvahs also. Maybe I said too much. Maybe they were lax in other mitzvahs also. But they were overall people who, overall, they weren't so horrible. They were someplace in the middle. They were noig and kula. They didn't do things exactly as they're supposed to. And therefore, a person who drinks their shecher might be, slip into thinking, well, these are nice, fine, Aruch people, because, they sort of do the right thing, so I'll drink their wine also. But the Maharshal says, but what happens if you have a person who doesn't do anything? He doesn't do beans. He doesn't have anything to do with keeping kosher and doing the right thing. He has nothing. So when that person, the fact that he happens to be Jewish, doesn't trick you into thinking you should drink his wine, it would never occur to you to drink his wine. To you, it's partial that you're not going to drink because he doesn't do anything that's right. It happens to be a sheikh who is kosher. It happens to be this thing that has that this thing doesn't need hashgacha, so you could drink from him. But you don't get tricked to thinking, if I could drink his sheikh tomorrow, maybe I'll drink his wine also. Okay, so and therefore, when you come to a person who doesn't care anything, okay, so then that person you're allowed to drink. You're allowed to drink his shecher also. So the din is in a very, very specific kind of a person. Like we might say there are people who keep kosher homes, but they would drink grape juice from a certain hashgacha that we consider to be not reputable, and to their mind that's considered kosher. They're not curing. They won't drink any grape juice. They only drink kosher grape juice. But they take it that's considered kosher. To them, they say, that means kosher. That's good enough. So that kind of a person who overall is caring about kosher, but he's weak and he's not doing it rightly, that's the person who you might get tricked into. Okay, so which means to say,
in the home. It's not going to be if you go to a store and buy something else.
I'm coming to a store in a second. Okay, so even in the most basic, it's a very, very limited person who we're talking about. Okay, now that's what the Maharshal says, and that's what these people bring from the Maharshal. I wondered if you could take a step further, which is that whole frame of the Maharshal is telling us that the Gemara is talking. You don't just take the Gemara at face value and just say, you're now allowed to drink from a yid if he's this kind of a person. You have to think about it. It only applies to very specific kind of cases. Well, what happens? Should we apply it then to a manufacturer b'chlal? Okay, for two reasons. When I walk into a store and I buy something and I decide to drink something, I know that the same manufacturer might have some with hashgacha, some without hashgacha, or something that are good, some things that are not good. Call up the shishri, hello, can I buy this hashgacha? So will I even be convinced? It's not like a person that I get used to eating in his house. This is a manufacturer. The fact that I bought product A from this manufacturer doesn't mean I'm going to buy product B. The second is, I don't even know that the person's a yid. I don't get it all. The Maharshal is telling us, think about why you're buying this thing. If you're eating it because he's a yid, you might slip and eat the other thing. That's not why I'm eating it. I'm drinking the thing because I decided I'm drinking it because I decided it doesn't need hashgacha or it has a good hashgacha or whatever it is. It has nothing to do with the fact that it's been yid. So you could wonder, according to the way the Maharshal says it, whether the whole thing applies to things coming from manufacturers and big companies, which has not. I'm not saying because I don't know the person. I mean, it's because I'm not buying it because of him and because I think of him as a yid, etc. Okay, so I told you 3 reasons why. This might apply in almost no cases. First of all, that it's a machlekes Shulchan if the whole thing applies altogether. The Mechaber says to be Shri Machmer, but it's not at all clear that that's really usher. Second is, it might only be to shecher tomorrow. And lastly is that it might only apply to very, very specific kind of yidden. And for those 3 reasons, Shulchan says all 3 reasons. He says for those 3 reasons the whole din doesn't apply. Most Yidden have never heard of it, and Chacham doesn't bring it either. Chalach follows the Rif, the Rambam, and the Rosh. Okay, he doesn't bring it either. He doesn't bring it either. And in fact, most people probably have never heard of this din. And in my side, I guess we don't do this. Okay.